Thanks everyone for joining this conversation today. My name is Kevin Moorhead. I lead the Cause Funds program at Charitable Impact. And our mission is pretty simple. We connect donors with inspiring Canadians who are making a real difference. We call at Charitable Impact those inspiring Canadians cause leaders, and they work with us to create cause funds. Most people know the issues they care about, but they often struggle with where and how to give with real impact. Cause funds make it simple. By pooling donations and relying on expert cause leaders like the ones we have today, donors can support a network of organizations creating real, measurable change. If you've taken the time to listen to this conversation today, you most likely care about the issue of youth mental health. In Canada, sadly, suicide is the second leading cause of death for young people. Over the past year, I've had the privilege of getting to know these two incredible leaders who have dedicated their lives to kids at risk. Robb Nash, a musician who turned his own near-death experience into a calling to reach young people, and Tegan Moss, who carries forward her family's legacy through the Kelty Foundation after their own unimaginable losses. Together, they've launched Operation Overcome, a bold effort to tackle our youth mental health crisis. So today, let's take a look behind this cause. Let's hear Robb and Tegan's stories, and most importantly, explore how everyday Canadians can help create a better, stronger, more connected system of support for kids across Canada. So Robb, Tegan, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
It's good to be alive, Kevin.
By the way, if anyone has questions for Robb and Tegan during this discussion, please do drop them in the chat. We will make time to answer your questions before we close today. And I think there will be some interesting links posted during the conversation as well, so feel free to check those out. So Robb, when I first met you, it's hard to ignore your physical presence. And I asked you about the names that are tattooed on your arms. And the story you told me, it gave me chills. I still tell your story the best I can every chance I get, because I want everyone to know about it. So let's imagine that no one here knows that story. Take us back to that moment you got the very first tattoo of a name on your arm. What led to that moment? And what did it mean to you?
Yeah, well, I have to go back a little ways. Like you mentioned, I had a near-death experience. I was at 17 years old, 6'5", playing lots of sports, and you feel like life is endless. You feel indestructible and invincible at 17, but I was in a really bad car accident where I was found with no pulse, not breathing. Obviously, I was resuscitated. Went through a long physical recovery, still having surgeries, and everybody was worried about like I had to have my head was rebuilt with titanium a few times and metal in my shoulder and chest, and everybody was asking about like how's your skull, how's your chest, how's your shoulder, your back, and nobody wasn't asking the important question, which was what's going on inside of the skull. How is your mental health? How's your emotional health? And that was my bigger struggle. For 2 years, I was listening to everybody tell me that, everything happens for a reason. And I lay there trying to figure that reason out. And it brought me to this really dark place where I didn't want to be alive. So for 2 years, I was suicidal. I was self-harming. No one knew. None of my friends, none of my family knew. I put on a mask like I was the life of the party. But I had these really dark thoughts. And then one day somebody came up to me and said, I know the reason you were hit by a semi. And I was like, what is it? And he goes, you got hit by a semi because you were going too fast on an icy road. That's why it happened, and you should figure out what you're going to do with it. Not everybody gets a second chance. And that sounds simple, but that like set me free. The first prompting I felt in my heart was to phone the semi driver that hit me just to let him know that I was still alive. And we had this amazing conversation. I was like, man, this felt good. And I was like, man, I had value. Like I was suicidal because I thought I was just a burden to the world. And man, I was like, man, there's got to be other people having these same thoughts as me. So I thought I should tell my story. Started a band, did our first few albums. We didn't sound very good, but we got better. Got a record deal, had some hits on the radio. We're touring, playing huge crowds. And then one day I was offered a tour for 9 months, going through schools and prisons, youth detention centers, reserves, telling my story. And I was like, yeah. So I walked away from my record deal to do that tour, and To be honest with you, Kevin, when I started the tour, talking in schools, I'd tell a story, play a song, but I never talked about the fact that I was suicidal because I didn't know what people would think of me. My whole story was just, hey, make every day count. You know, you never know what could happen tomorrow. But then one day I got a call from a school in Ontario and they called us and said, hey, we just lost a student to suicide. And we heard you really effective. Can you come right away? Because on this girl's note, it was it was revealed that she had a pact with a friend. If you kill yourself, I'll kill myself. Principal says, we don't know who it is. Can you come right away? So we dropped everything, flew out, set up, and we sat on stage. And I knew somebody in the audience was about to take their life. And for the first time, I said it from stage. I know someone here is thinking about taking their life. I was like, you're not alone. I was there once too. And it felt like 1,000 pounds off me. And after the presentation, man, the conversations were just, it was way more than autographs and selfies. It was, you know, people hugs and people sharing their stories. And then this girl walked up to me and she pulled a note out of her pocket and she goes, here. I was like, what's this? And she said, it's my suicide note. I was going to kill myself this weekend. She goes, here, I don't need this anymore. And she walked off with the school counselor and principal to get the help that they needed. And I was like, blown away. I couldn't believe it. Like she had this note on her, like that wasn't freshly written. And I talked with some police and they said very rarely when we come on the scene is the note freshly written. People usually write it months before and they carry it with them. So that became a focus for us. And that was the start of over 971 suicide notes now that kids have pulled out of their pockets. That's kids walking through hallways in schools with notes in their pockets in class. And then to get to the tattoos, the original question, a lot of these kids started tattooing the lyrics of our songs on their arms where they used to cut. So I took the signatures from the suicide notes and the names and I tattooed them on my arms to show kids, look, not every story of mental health ends in a tragedy and kids need to see that hope.
That's so powerful, Rob. I mean, it still moves me every single time I see it. And I have to say, I've been lucky enough to see some of your shows, and I actually saw, and with my own eyes, one of those notes with razor blades,
Yeah.
and it kind of moved me to my core. So it's thank you for what you do. It's incredibly moving. Um, Tegan, your work with the Kelty Foundation is also very, very personal, as I've gotten to know. Your work, in my mind, is one of the most beautiful ways of dealing with grief because you help countless others in the process. Would you mind sharing a little bit about the story of Kelty, the Kelty Foundation, your own personal connection, and how that's inspired the path that you're on today?
Absolutely. Yeah, unfortunately, my cousin Kelty, he didn't have someone like Rob. And when I was 16 years old, we lost him. He took his life. And unfortunately, I was witness to his younger sister who tried to deal with his grief for many years. And she eventually developed an eating disorder. And we lost her 7 years later as well from complications from that. And I firsthand just saw what loss does to an entire family. And I was so inspired by my aunt and uncle who created the Kelty Foundation, and they did some incredible things helping with Kelty mental health at BC Children's Hospital. And there's a Kelty Center at the Hope Center at Lionsgate Hospital. And they've partnered with a lot of organizations and crisis centers all the way across Canada. And so I was so honored to recently step into the role to lead the next chapter of the foundation, because as the next generation of parents, I feel like it's our duty to make sure that we stop tragedies like what happened to my family from continuing to happen.
Yeah, and unfortunately, these tragedies are happening far too often. I already mentioned that suicide is the second leading cause of death for young people in Canada. Children now, even in our primary schools, are dying by suicide, and the rates of depression are climbing. We have research to demonstrate this. And I feel like it would be wrong for me not to mention that Indigenous communities are disproportionately affected by this. I was reading today that suicide rates in First Nation communities are 6 times higher than the national average. And if you look at Inuit communities, that rate goes up to 24 times higher. There's clearly a crisis in this country. And I'd like, Rob, if you could help shed some light on what is going on here from your frontline work in the schools, what is driving this crisis in Canada?
Yeah, it would be a few hours to fully cover that, but a big thing, obviously, a lot of people know the issues with social media. And you mentioned indigenous communities. We've done a lot of work. We're about to go back up to Nunavut for the first time in a little bit, but we've worked a lot with these indigenous communities, and I'll sum it up with one thing that I see is like we don't always take the time to look in our own backyard. But I was on a reserve that was 4 hours from a major city, and there were two black nuns in the audience, and I was like, "What is this story?" And I went up to them and listen to this. I asked where you're from. They said we're from Africa, and I said, "What are you doing here?" They said our church in Africa heard about the issues on the reserves in Canada. They raised money to fly them here and get them a place, and they help these kids, and they go to the city, get groceries for them at lunch that don't have lunch. Like, this is our community. You also, like, there's so much that you just said there, Kevin. You talked about it's getting younger and younger. Just in some of these communities, one that we recently talked with lost an 8-year-old, one lost a 7-year-old. Like, you should be playing Lego at those at these ages, and that's why we talk about getting to them at all these different ages. Like the Kelty Foundation gets conversations started, with kids and their parents at young ages. So it's getting younger, but the complexity of this is massive.
And Rob, you started off talking a little bit about social media, and I wonder, Tegan, if you want to pick up on that a little bit. I mean, I've heard a lot from both of you about this issue of disconnection. I mean,
Mhm.
how
Yeah,
does that?
absolutely. Yeah, and it's getting younger and younger, like Rob said, and kids are getting involved in social media. And, we are fighting against these giant corporations that are spending billions of dollars to try and figure out how to get our kids addicted to screens. So that's just a small piece of the problem. But we as parents and as community members, as leaders, we really have to step up if we even have a chance of getting into our kids' hearts and minds, because it's a big fight.
So, Rob, you had shared this incredible story of that moment when those kids reach out to you, and I've heard you refer to them as breakthrough moments.
Mhm.
Could you talk a little bit about what is a breakthrough moment for you, and what does that mean for the kid?
Yeah, well, I think all of us had moments in our lives when you look back and like that was a key moment for me. You remember where you were or what was conversation you were having or maybe even a song that you were listening to. So we all have these breakthrough moments, and I think what we try to do through our organizations and as Operation Overcome is to provide those moments. Like, for example, when we perform, like I'll tell a story of a girl that we met in lockdown, and then she walks out on stage and performs with us. We've got music videos on the back walls just showing kids ripping up their notes. And what upsets me, and I think what we're trying to do here, like we can learn from the tragedies that we've seen, but the media and social media don't balance the stories. Like, tragedy sells, but again, kids need to see that not every story ends with a tragedy. So it's a lack of hope that's in the world, and that's, I think, what we have to try to do. And rather than all doing it separately, if we can come together and do this and we can see that we're on the same team, let's, as a country, as a people, as organizations, as charities, that we don't work in silos. It's like let's not fight over the same kid. Like, we are all trying to give them these moments in their life to provide that breakthrough. And for some, it might start with a conversation as a kid. It's seeing something through the Kelty program. Maybe they see something through us or reaching out to. So, like, we have toured from coast to coast to coast in Canada, meeting with hundreds of thousands of teenagers and finding a lot of amazing, like, local organizations that want to help. They're passionate, but they don't have the funding necessarily to do that. And that's why, if we can come together, we can make sure that that help gets to that kid.
Yeah, and that's, by the way, on the breakthrough moment, I was lucky enough to see a show live, one of your shows in Winnipeg, and I'll never forget in that show, one young person came to the stage, and the room of 600 kids was just silence, and you knelt down and had a conversation. There was an exchange, obviously a suicide note, and that moment clearly had changed that young person's life. So I've seen the power of these moments. But then what I also really appreciate from both of you is that emphasis on being that bridge between the hurt and the help. And Tegan, when we first met, I was so impressed how your lens on this problem is that it has to be a joint effort. That no one person, no one organization, can possibly solve this on their own. So when you hear that phrase, the bridge between hurt and help, what does that mean to you, and how would you explain that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we can all agree that there's not a one size fits all solution to mental health. And different supports are needed in different ways in different communities. And we know that. And the other thing that we know is that a person, especially a young person, needs multiple touch points along their journey. It's not enough to have one workshop and then leave them on their own. Mental health, mental wellness it's a continuing skill set that we need to practice and talk about and really engage with children. And so I think our vision with Operation Overcome is so powerful. It's how do we get a lot of organizations to work together? How do we share resources? We share knowledge, we share best practices, innovation, data, and we are stronger together. And there's not a bunch of wasted time fundraising in silo, or even filling out grant applications, the hours and really the donors' dollars that are wasted doing that, rather than having one place where everybody can come together and be on the same page and make sure that that child is supported throughout their whole journey.
Well, let's dig into that a little bit more, this notion of collaboration. So, first of all, from evidence, we know that Canadians really do care about this issue. We know that a minimum of $100 million a year is donated to youth mental health in Canada. And that's not including any government investments. That's just philanthropic donations to this specific cause. But donors are faced with dozens and dozens of charities, all asking for their own support. And meanwhile, the crisis is getting worse. And I want to share a statistic that I read today that according to most 2024 government statistics, the estimate is that 1.25 million youth are in need of mental health support. 550,000 receive help. So in other words, 60% of our kids in Canada who need help don't get it. That's a crisis. And so from a child's perspective, I guess the question, Tegan, I'm going to go back to you again, is like, is that really what a child needs? Kind of a patchwork of groups separately competing for dollars? Or is there a better way? And how does Operation Overcome answer that challenge?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think again, just going back to that network of support, because as we talked about, there's different communities with different needs, but even within a community, there's different resources and different fits for different people. So the more that we can create this network and be the glue between many organizations, the faster really a child can go from or a parent from having concerns to actually getting the support they need in the way they need it, whether it's texting kids helpline or it's joining a group. It looks different. So I think the more again that we can work as a whole to identify those gaps and identify those needs and then pass them on to the right resources, the stronger we're going to be for all of these kids.
Yeah. And I'll just add, like you talked about the need, like pre-COVID, 1 in 5 teenagers had seriously considered suicide in the last 12 months. 1 in 5 kids. So the need is so massive. And Kevin, you're an incredible human being, but you're talking about asking us about the need to come together. But it was you guys at Charitable Impact that approached us, and you said, look, you're doing great work. We deal with so many people, as you just mentioned, donors that are like, they'll have a cause that moves them. It'll be like cancer because I lost my mom or my son or my spouse. So somebody's moved by it. They don't always know how to research and find out. I want to donate. I don't have the time to take all the calls or do all the research. So when you approached us, you said like we've got this idea of cause funds and mental health is a massive one. Would you help champion this? And so much credit to you guys at Charitable Impact because you were like you saw the need. When I started in charity as a musician, I was pretty naive. I thought, oh, cool, we'll all work together, all these charities, but it wasn't really happening. But with the way you were able to approach this and put some structure to it has been amazing, and getting us together with the Kelty Foundation and now reaching out and branching out and saying, hey, who else wants to be a part of this? Let us know what's going on. So it's a huge kudos to you guys at Charitable Impact for coming up with this cause fund idea.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, but I'm also going to pass on those kudos to the charitable impact donor community because because it's an increasingly savvy community of people who give and care and want more for their generosity
Right.
and are tired of seeing situations get worse and worse as more money enters the system. And so I think it was incumbent on us to create a better way, like, to give, a more combined way. One more quote. I'm sorry if I'm throwing too many quotes at you, but there's this quote that jumped out at me. Lest anybody think that the three of us are just speaking kind of haphazardly. This is from a government report in 2024. Quote, the data undeniably presents a disjointed system and funding structure that has created a health crisis for our younger generation, right? So it's not just that passive either. Like, we've done this, we've created that system. But to be optimistic about it, I think that donors have a role to play in making that system better, right? A more coordinated, a more jointly funded system. And so with that kind of tee up, maybe we can talk a little bit more about Operation Overcome. And so, well, Rob, let me start with you actually, because you and I started this conversation on Operation Overcome. If you talk about like big picture vision, what
Mhm.
does Operation Overcome want to do? Why does it exist?
Well, I can tell you this, that our healthcare system is pretty broken. You know, it's rare that I don't walk somewhere, whether, I travel a lot, whether I'm at an airport walking through the mall, somebody walks up to me, and often it's somebody that's maybe had a breakthrough, as we've talked about. But way too often the conversation is, hey, our daughter was struggling and we had to wait 6 months to see a psychologist or get a counselor or anything like that. The amount of times I have that conversation is just so frustrating. Like, to think that people can schedule their dark moments for 6 months from now. And, that's, I think, the big part of what we're talking about here, why we're so passionate. Because some people think your passion is what you love. And at times that is. Like, I love music, I do. But my passion, and I think our passion here, isn't actually a passion of what we love, it's what we hate. We hate what is happening to our youth. Tegan is driven by the hate of what happened to her family. You know, Mothers Against Drunk Driving wasn't made of people that were passionate about drinking driving. They lost, and it was mothers that got together originally against drunken driving. This is our passion because we've seen this. And so when you approach this, it's like our thought is so much bigger than just how can we continue to work as the Robb Nash Project continue to do these things. I know that we were in a community in Saskatchewan recently, and I was speaking. There were students there from 40 different schools represented, and I saw three tables on this side of the gym and three tables on this side of local people that were passionate, that had resources for the kids, and they had their displays set up. And it's like we're all working separately. And I just took the time to say, like, hey, kids, I used my platform in that moment because Bono from U2 said it well, fame is currency and you can spend it on whatever you want. And I said, make sure you go talk to all these groups on either side because they're on my team. We're working together with them. Find out so that if you go through something, you know where you can reach out to. And then you saw all the kids going to meet them, and these organizations came up at why did you say that? Why did you say we're on the same team? I'm like, because we are. We're all trying to help these people. And it sounded like something new. Again, I was naive and I thought charities would work together on mental health, but it's not happening. But as we've seen, like, right, Tegan, like, we're watching this as we meet with other people. Hey, do you want to work together? It sound it's really like people are like, actually, that would be great. I don't know why we haven't done this sooner. And so, yeah, we're passionate about this, not just to keep ourselves going, but to make sure that that kid knows, hey, we may not be here tomorrow, and they might not be here, but we don't want you to have to wait 6 months. We want you to be aware of what is available for you when you get through that tough day.
I have to just kill before Tegan, you jump in. I have to share a quick story from my first conversation with Rob. I was kind of just talking about cause funds at Charitable Impact, and then Rob told me 3 days later, he texted me and he said, "Hey Kevin, I thought you were a little bit crazy because you were essentially asking me, like, hey, do you want to raise funds for other charities?" And then you're like, you woke up, what you said is you woke up and you're like, oh yeah, that is what I want to do because it's the kid that matters.
Yeah.
And that's what matters. I want to raise funds for other charities, right? So that was moment that also really stuck with me. And Tegan, why did Kelty join Operation Overcome?
Yeah, I came from a very similar mindset of just collaboration, because one of the great things when I took over as president is I got to meet so many organizations doing incredible work. But I realized that there was a lack of A, them working together, and B, people knowing that they even exist. And if the kids and the families don't know that organizations exist, then how are they able to access the help? So I think Robb's team and our team really aligned in that matter. Like, how can we bring the conversation to kids, get them talking, and then let them know about their options, and use our tools and our programming to raise the awareness for all these other organizations, because of course we need to be working together. As we said, one size does not fit all, and we'll all be stronger and we'll all benefit. And at the end of the day, all it matters, it's those moments. For us, our program is a real upstream focus, because 70% of mental health challenges start in childhood or adolescence. So we're looking younger. How do we start the conversation between parent and child at home early, so that when they have their check-ins other times in their life along their journey, like when Robb's team comes in, they have similar language and they're already aware of some of the incredible organizations in Canada.
Yeah, and I just want to say, as an artist, as a writer, us choosing the title Operation Overcome, and the song you heard at the beginning is the song I wrote. So often we meet with kids, like that person you saw walk up on stage in front of 2,000 of their classmates and strangers and handed me a note in front of, like, everybody saw that. But it's like, I meet with so many people, and when you think of the term overcome, name a moment in your life when you were overcome. And so quickly I'll be like, when I lost my dad, Tegan, when you lost Kelty, when you think your parents got divorced, and we jump to these, that's the moment I was overcome. And we want to meet kids in that moment when they're overcome. But I was like, but this word overcome means so much more. You can also become overcome with joy, overcome with peace, overcome. And so you can overcome the struggles that you're in the midst of. And so this word and the Operation Overcome, if to some it might mean I'm overcome. I need an operation. Like, I need help in this moment. But it can also be like Operation Overcome. How do we overcome this? How do we, can you completely end suicide? Man, sure, let's go for it. Why not? But what I can tell you is suicide is the second leading cause of death among young people in Canada. And that was not the case a few years ago. So that means it became that, which means it doesn't have to be that. We can turn back the clock and start to approach these things and work together so that it's no longer the second leading cause of death. Let's turn it to the third leading cause and the fourth leading again. Let's get that to the kids, and let's get them the help that they need, and find out show them where they can find that help.
And I talked about that statistic earlier, that 60% of Canadian kids are not getting the help they need. And so tell me a little bit about your goals. Let's be practical now. So collaboration is good, but to do what? I've heard you both mention you're going to reach 1 million kids. So tell me a little bit more. Like, what exactly are you aiming to do with Operation Overcome?
Hit it, Tegan.
Well, we want to reduce the suicide rate. Absolutely. Rob said it. Like, that is the ultimate goal. Whether it's upstream or any point along a child's journey, we don't want them to end that way. We want them to have hope. And hope can look different for different kids. Like we said, different resources, different conversations. Maybe it's a conversation they have with a caregiver. Maybe it's seeing Rob's show. Maybe it's walking into a Foundry Center. Maybe it's different things, but they have that moment where there's hope. They pause and they know that there's something more, and that's where those moments happen. So we want 1 million moments for children across Canada, and in collaboration with all these organizations, delivering those moments in the way that kids need them.
Yeah. Again, I said before, we've heard from communities and visited them where they've lost 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds. How do we get that conversation so that they're open to have that conversation with their parents or at school or with a counselor? So a goal of all these moments along their life. Oh, I remember something when I was in grade 4. Then I remember something in grade 6. Then I remember hearing something this. Then I saw a video. Then I saw this on TikTok. And you just start to use all these places. And this is the thing. We want to reach 1 million people. 60% are unreached. So it's like, we want to reach 1 million people. Tegan, I don't know if you can confidently say you can get to 1 million. I know that'd be a struggle for us, but guess what we can do? We can come together How do we provide a million of those moments for a million kids? One big thing is going to have to be is collaboration. We can reach a few thousand, you can reach a few thousand, but if we unite, now we can get to a million, and we can get to a million moments for those kids. And everybody watching, listening to this, you can be a part of that. You may not be the one that gets handed the note, but you can say, like, look, and we will make sure that you hear this is what's been happening. This is what you can see. You were a part of this in your community. There's a reason you're a part of this. There's a reason that this is now in the hands of a school counselor and not being read by a parent next to their bed, which happens way too often. But that's what we can do, and we can only reach the amount of people that need to reach if we collaborate.
Some of the reservations I've heard though about this is that it's fantastic that you're doing this, but how does it actually work? I've never seen this model before. How do you make decisions about where the funds go? So Tegan, I know that this is also not the first time you've heard this question. I wonder how do you respond to that question?
Yeah, so Operation Overcome has an advisory council, and the advisory council it's a mix of people from lived experience, Indigenous communities, from the mental health field, professionals from the school system. We are relying on them who know the landscape and are on the ground. So that's a really important part of this vision, that we're talking and we're getting the opinions of people on the ground from the community who understand the landscape as a whole. And part of it is this knowledge exchange as well, identifying gaps and understanding where funding needs to go. And again, from Rob and I's point of view, we're on the ground in schools too, so we're really listening to the kids and the parents and the teachers and listening to their needs as well.
Yeah, this is like this is a war. You think about what is happening, and you think about the term of, like, my new album is called This Is War. It's because this is what, and we're on the front lines, and we're working with people on the front lines. And whether you can be that person that is working in the front lines with us, or you're with an organization, we're talking with them. But you can be in triage in moments. You can be a part of that healing. You can be a part of the support. You can be an ally, which, whether you think of ally within all of these terms, we are at war, and we want to be victorious, and that's what our goal is. And we've seen it. We've seen that we can be victorious if we work together.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that always stands out in talking to both of you is your child-centered lens. And it's actually surprisingly rare, right? That whenever I hear both of you talk about your work, it's always through the lens of the kid. Not always a child, it can be a younger child, it could be an older child, but it's always from their perspective. So I wonder, I don't know if this is a clunky question, but what is the difference between giving to one charity versus giving to an operation from the perspective of a child?
Hmm. Yeah, well, that's really good. Oh man, there's so many places I want to go with this question. You say it's just but it's such a nugget because, for a child, they won't just, there's so many studies that show, like, how many kids, if there's certain puzzles you give a kid, and how many people become genius. And at 5 years old, the amount of kids that are genius because they're creative, and throughout time, and there's whole TED Talks on this, how often school kind of can kill your creativity, and you forget how to work together. You forget these things, you lose that creativity. But kids, they do work together. School projects, they do these things. You learn how to do that. That's one thing that I think is so great about sports, is you find out what your strengths and weaknesses. I'm 6'5", and I had certain strengths playing football and volleyball and hockey. But guess what? At 6'5", I'm not as agile. So kids figure that out. You learn that in school on teams and all these things, of how, like, hey, you're good at this part of this. Why don't you take this role and I'll do this and you do this? And kids figure that stuff out. And unfortunately, throughout time, we lose that. And we try to get back to that. We try to get back to that creativity, which is what it takes, and you see it so often as we work with young people. They are creative. They understand that.
And I'll add to that, we recently had the pleasure of meeting with some other amazing mental health organizations, and somebody said to us, it's like an orchestra. You need lots of different instruments to create a movement. And so that's really what it does for the kid. It allows them to be wrapped around with support. Again, multiple touch points and in different ways.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, you talked, Rob, that this crisis is in part a problem of a hope deficit. And when I talk to you guys, I start to feel like I'm recovering myself from a hope deficit, that I can feel a little bit more optimistic. And I also know that we're not alone, right? There's a great quote that I want to read from the CEO of Mental Health Research Canada, Akela Peoples. And the quote is, "Without collaboration, there will always be duplication of efforts, inefficient use of resources, and missed opportunities to strengthen and scale evidence-based solutions. Collaboration starts with leaders." So, Tegan, I wonder if you want to speak to this quote and talk directly to the donors about how they can contribute to this solution.
Absolutely. I think really it for a donor, so much of your funding can be wasted if you're giving to two charities that then need to, hire full-time staff just to fill out grants, for example. So if we can pool together, it just means that that dollar is going so much farther. It's really actually getting to the kids. At the end of the day, there's more actually landing in the kids' laps because all of those efforts, and it's not just fundraising, it's resources. So it's, even with Rob's team and our team, we're popping in helping each other with different skill sets that maybe our team doesn't have. And then it's like I said, it's that knowledge exchange. And I just feel like we're going to move the needle so much faster if we can eliminate unnecessary spending.
And Rob, I've seen collaboration in action during your shows because I mean, I'll let you talk about it, but you give kids the option to text Nash, which means they go to Kids Helpline. You've promoted other service organizations. I mean, talk about what you already do to promote this idea of being the bridge between hurt and help.
Yeah, I talk about this in a documentary they just made about our project and followed up with some of these kids. If you would want to see hope and see like that feeling, and I talk about this in that documentary, is the fact that like, look, it took me a while to figure out what my role is. I'm not trying to be a counselor. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a social worker. You know, again, you've said it a few times now, but it was like, but if we could be the bridge between the hurting and the help, that's what we're trying to do. We're just hoping somebody's working on this help, and as we find it, Kids Helpful, and you mentioned, we put it on every kid that walks out of our concert. It's up on the screens, but also every kid gets a poster, not just so that they get a picture of me, but on the back it's like, text this number if you're going through something, and it's right there. Text Nash to 686868. So there's a collaboration right there. Kids Helpful, and it was like today, like, yeah, we get that your platform is valuable, so we validate the person at Kids Help Phone to call them. We validate the school counselor. Hey, we're here because we work. When I meet with kids backstage after the show, the school counselor has to be beside me. When you talked about Foundry, which is, IYS, but it's called Foundry in BC, but it's all across Canada, these places where the walk-in centers, and they came to see our shows when we were in Surrey a little while ago. And by the way, we're doing 3 shows in Surrey in a few weeks in October. If you guys want to come watch, we'll put you on the guest list. You can come see these breakthroughs. But Foundry was like, hey, we've got this new thing. And we've got some new locations. I was like, give me your QR code. And at the end of the show, you saw it, Kevin. I think you were there too, Tegan. It was like, kids at the end of the show, they're hyped up, they're energized, they want, or they're opening up, right? And then we say, pull out your phones. You got 1,000 kids pull out their phones. I'm like, grab that QR code, and all these kids grab the QR code for Foundry. And now some people don't like to play in the same sandbox, and that's a shame. Like for us, we will send kids to their sandbox. I don't mind that Kids Help Phone will get the stats that this many people text or call because of us. It's just we know that it's getting to the kids. If somebody goes to Foundry because they got that QR code from us, that's awesome. That's huge. And when we talk about these million steps, I just want to add that one thing we talk about in our show is this. Everybody's going to go through trauma. Everybody is going to see tragedy. And guess what? They may not have seen it yet at 7 years old or 10 years old or even 15. But I've seen it so many times where somebody walks up and says, I saw your show when I was in middle school. I thought it was cool. but I wasn't going through anything tough at the time. But guess what? 2 years later, this boy in Edmonton told me I lost my dad and my mom. I didn't know what I was going to do, but then I remembered all the stuff you said in that presentation. So we're doing all of this, these million moments for a million kids, so that it's like when you get to that tough day, you have a, oh yeah, I remember this in grade 6. I remember this ad that I saw. I remember this video. I remember this presentation. And that's what you do it for. It's like you can't predict when somebody's going to go through something tough, but life is full of pain, and people need to know when you wake up looking for pain, you will find it. But if you get up looking for hope, looking for help, you can find that too. And we have to show them where to look.
Powerful. It's a powerful concept. And I do think it's so important to emphasize that when we talk about moments, you have to attach that word breakthrough moments,
Mhm.
because a moment doesn't stop. Like Rob, you just articulated it so well that a moment carries forward into a lifetime, right? And a moment can give you a lifetime, right? And a moment can trigger a conversation with your mom, your dad, your sister, your counselor. It can be a visit to the hospital. It could be whatever that moment requires. But when we say we're focusing on a million moments, it's not just a moment, right? I mean, it's a transformation moment.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We had an experience recently. We were actually talking to somebody who's a researcher at Foundry, and her child went through our program. And she said it was so, I had this wonderful conversation with my son. And then he took that same conversation and brought it to his counselor and then continued the conversation there. So, that moment for us, it was traveling on as well. And hopefully that's something they can refer to for the rest of their life.
And that feeds into my penultimate question. And Tegan, I'm going to go to you on this one. What does success look like for Operation Overcome? Fast forward 5 years, what's been achieved?
Yeah, so ultimately, the suicide rate is down. As Rob said, it is not the second leading cause of death. And the other thing is that we do have a form of working together that is really established, where there's a fluidity between organizations in terms of collaboration, in terms of communication, and kids are also much more aware of what is available in their community. If we can inspire and ignite the essence of collaboration, even in other organizations, like Rob, like our program as well, it is there to share what's going on in the community. And every other mental health organization that will be part of Operation Overcome, we're going to encourage them to share with whoever they talk to what else is available. So more and more and more kids, there's a ripple effect. So more kids understand what their options are, and they know they're not alone.
Anything to add to that, Rob?
Tegan nailed it.
Yeah, as she so often does.
Yeah.
All right. So the last question is I have to ask, why you started to work with charitable impact. What was it about us that you decided you want to launch Operation Overcome with us?
Yeah. I'll start if you don't mind, Tegan. It began when you approached us with something bigger. And yeah, it took me a couple days to go like, man, we're just trying to stay afloat here as our own organization. We know how tough it is. And for me, if I'm completely honest, it's very rare that I meet somebody that makes me go, man, I thought I was a big dreamer. Like, this is an even bigger vision. And that's what it honestly takes. Like, the idea that you brought was bigger than anything I had thought of. And it was such an adrenaline rush to see that there were big dreamers that didn't just look at just the need and the despair within that need, but it was like the hope. Hey, imagine if just raising money to keep you, what if we could help these other, that what absolutely blew my mind, the magnitude of what it was. And it wasn't just because of despair, it was because of the hope. And I think if we can work together, we could do this. And again, it's rare that I find people that stir me, that have a bigger vision and a bigger dreamers. And you put me in my place that day, and I thought I'd like to be in that same place with you guys, because I thought if we could do this, and I believe we can, and we're seeing it, I think it's going to be remarkable. So I can't thank you guys at Triple Impact. I know this isn't your own only cause fund either. Just this concept of what you're doing in other areas, I think it's amazing. And what I always say to people is, you know, as somebody that has woke up from a coma and found out that your heart stopped beating, you think about, man, what would people have remembered me for? Like, did I make an impact in my life? And I always tell people, find something that stirs you. And if you're stirred by what you're hearing today, join us, like be a part of it. Like that'd be remarkable. If you're not stirred by this, that's okay. But find something that stirs you. I always say, like, don't wait till you die like I did before you start to live, before you start to chase. Not just you talked about what would success look like. There's one other step. It's from success to significance, which there's a great book, From Success to Significance. But we toured with some big bands. We've shared the stage, and you meet people that got to success, and that's where they stopped, and they never went on to significance. And I'll never forget you taught us that. It's like way too many people, like they wait till they retire before they start to look at causes that can help. And we try to show young people, we give them activities, they need to see that you don't wait till you're 65 and then say, maybe I'll give a portion of of my, not just money, but my time, my energy towards something that I believe in. So find something that stirs you. If it's this, be a part of it. If this isn't it, find something. And I know you guys have other cause funds too that might stir people.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add to that is, we say that Operation Overcome, we're collecting good humans. And, charitable impact, you are a group of very good humans that are willing to be brave and innovate and try new things and shift what's wrong. And we feel honored to just be a part of that.
Thank you. And obviously the honor is ours. And again, I would just channel our donors as well, because we really are a community of donors that want to come together and create the change that they want to see in the world. And so I love that community element of it. And that's really what drives us and animates us. And Rob, I have to say that it's what stirs us. I mean, whenever we get to spend time with the two of you, that's like oxygen for us. It gives us life. So yeah, thank you also for what you do.
Yeah.
We
I
do
don't know
have,
if this is on me, but I just saw the first line of it. If I join the community as a donor, what does that look like? How can I
I was just gonna
engage
ask.
with the community? Yeah, like we want to show you like what you are a part of, whether and you can say like I'm interested in this on a whole, or maybe it's this area, or I have something. But one thing that we like, you can be involved with so much more. Like just when it comes to, for example, like within our organization, it's not just, obviously everybody knows that in order to do anything, it takes money to pull it off. But even with our donors, we're always like, at our project, it's like, don't just to make a donation, come and be an usher at the show when we're in your area. Maybe you have a connection to a school that says, hey, you could use the Kelty program. Hey, maybe you're connected to an, maybe you are connected to some dollars, but maybe you could come be an usher at a show, or you could be a part of these things, and we will make sure that you find out what's happening as Operation Overcome grows and how you're a part of it. But that's what we always do. Like don't just send us a check. You can do that, no problem. And some people do that amazingly and don't even ask to be credited anywhere. We just got one donation that was completely anonymous, which blows my mind when somebody says, I'll give this money, but I want my logo here, which is fine. But whether it's a donation or somebody says, I'm going to make a donation, but I also like to come be a part of one of the events that you can do, and we can add you into any of that. And sometimes you'll have an idea. How can I engage? What would you think? Here, how would you like to engage with this? Maybe you'll have an idea that we haven't thought of.
Yeah, I love that. Tegan, do you want to also take a stab at There's a question here from Jen saying, as a donor, how will you keep us updated and involved over time so we can actually see the difference we're making?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we will have an annual report. So the same way you would for a single organization, but it will be an overview of the collective impact. And there'll also be updates regularly on our website, Operation Overcome, and through social media as well. And Rob and I also are going to be doing some video updates as well, so that we can just tell you what we're seeing on the ground, who we've been talking to, and highlighting some of the other incredible organizations within Operation Overcome.
Fantastic. And we do have a comment as well, maybe not a question, but you can turn it into one. When dreamers join forces and grab a hold of hope for the future, magical things can happen. Excited to see what Operation Overcome will do.
Dang,
Um,
I don't know who that was, but I'll write a song with you. I like it.
there you go. There's an invitation right there for Amber to write a song with Robb Nash.
I can hear that creativity, but when you hear something, it stirs you, and yeah, I'll give you credit, Amber, if I write a song with those lyrics. How about that? Oh, or we could write together. I'm not putting that aside, but that was creative. I like that.
Well, I want to build on that just for one last question then, because I want to emphasize this community element. And I know we've talked about having potentially have local groups all across the country down the road where you can have your own giving group, whether it's in Brandon, Manitoba or Kelowna, BC. But can you talk a little bit more to how you would envision potentially kind of stirring people at the local level to get more involved, like directly? Like you said, it's not just giving checks. There's so many ways to get involved. Can we build on that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we are both of our programs are very event focused. And the beautiful thing with events is it can be so collaborative. So I think, people from whatever scale that they want can host their own types of giving groups or events, whether it's a dinner with some friends that you all want to talk about what you're seeing with mental health. Or if it's larger scale in your community or a fundraiser, I think you can create local giving groups that is going to be a part of this network of Operation Overcome and that you have a seat at the table here.
Yeah, and we're doing an event coming up in BC, like where we can share, stories and I don't have a lot of gifts, but I do like to tell stories. I like to play music and if you have a chance to maybe you're invited to the event that we're doing or you want to come to one of our presentations or their presentations, you want to see what's actually happening, you can be on the ground with us. But yeah, if there's something you want to do, like what we're planning for when we do fundraising events, our big show is like lots of lights and flashes and guitars and drums and everything like that. But for an event we're about to do together to talk more about Operation Overcome, we'll tell stories. And then I'm gonna do an acoustic song with a girl that we met in lockdown, and she thought she had nothing to offer this world. The police found her laying on the train tracks in Calgary, and um, you know, I'll be doing a song with her. So it's like showing these moments, and that's what we do. So yeah, there's so many ways to do it. You can see what it's part of, and again, I'm trying not to make this at all about the Robb Nash Project, but if you want to see why we do this, and we always joke that that's kind of my role here is get everybody stirred because I'm not the organizational person, but this documentary that I talk about, you can hear from six of these kids, hearing them tell their stories rather than just me telling a story. You can hear them talking about it, and by the way, that's also a follow-up to our program where they do walk through a curriculum in their classes where we had teachers, social workers, counselors, social workers, psychologists, teachers. I'm probably missing one, but broke it up, and then we got the input from them and a teacher out of Montreal to put it into this curriculum that follows our program, where kids get to journal about what they learn from each of these stories. And those journal entries go straight to the school counselor. So it's finding all these ways to tell stories. But I love that you can, if this is stirred by you and you want to bring people together, you can, whether we can make it there or some people even watch our documentary and how can we be involved with that. But hosting these events and bringing people together, and then somebody goes, hey, I'm connected to this principal or this superintendent, or maybe our organization could help with this. And we always say that when people donate, hey, if we're in your area, you come, be in that building, come see what you're a part of.
As you can tell, we work with incredible storytellers, so I have no concerns that if you're a donor to this fund, you're going to be getting a lot of good stories in return. There was one final question that just came in, and I love the handouts you showed with all the resources for kids on the back. What key resources would you recommend for educating oneself on supporting a loved one in crisis?
Hmm.
And what do you find kids are most receptive to?
Yeah. Well, that's heavy. But I'll say this because this could be hours of conversation again. But I'll say this when I talk with parents. I don't understand what my daughter's going through, my son's going through, my niece, my nephew, my grandkid. One thing I'll always say is avoid the cliches. Like if I'm assuming this is coming from somebody that's I need words, and guess what? Sometimes those words don't exist. If it was like, oh, say this and it'll make it all better, um, those words don't always exist. Avoid the cliches. People told me everything happens for a reason, and that didn't help. I had to try to figure out the reason I was hit by a semi. What we say is everything happens with potential. tragedy has the potential to tear apart a person. It has a potential to tear apart a family, a community, a, a, a school, a whole city, a province, a country. We've seen that. But tragedy also has the potential to bring people together. Look what has happened to your family, Tegan. What could have torn your family apart has brought them together and wanting to help other people. Let people know, like, if you've got a son, daughter that's going through something, don't say, oh, don't worry, the pain will go away. When I lost my dad, I couldn't believe how many people said, oh, don't worry, the pain will go away. And then the pain didn't go away. And I thought there was something wrong with me. Life is full of pain. If you've lost somebody, like when I lost my dad, that pain shouldn't go away because I'm never going to lose them. The pain of losing Kelty is not going to go away, and it shouldn't. But like I said before, if pain doesn't go away, neither does the strength. If you wake up looking for pain, you'll find it. If you wake up in the morning looking for hope, you'll find that too. So that's what I would say. And you don't always have to have the right thing to say. You don't have to say, I know what you're going through. I went through this as well. If you don't know what somebody's going through, it's okay to just, I don't know what you're going through, but I'll sit with you while you're going through this. And sorry, I'm feeling like this is really personal, and these are conversations I have way too often, but if someone in your life, whoever wrote that, is going through something, if you're aware of it, you're miles ahead of most people, and you need to congratulate yourself. Most people have no idea when the people around them are hurting. So if you're aware of their pain, you're miles ahead of most people. And if you can say to yourself, I'm available, like I will do anything in my power. It took me a while to realize that we can be available for the people around us, but we're not always responsible. We can't make all the decisions for people. But if you know that someone around you is hurting, you are doing well already. That means you're already having conversations, you're communicating, and your eyes are open. So you might be discouraged at times, but you're doing some things that are very right that a lot of people are missing.
Thank you, Rob. Tegan, anything on the additional resources from Kelty? I guess go to the Kelty Foundation website, I guess is the answer.
KeltyMentalHealth.ca at BC Children's Hospital is a fantastic resource for parents as well. There's a great search tool there, and it can answer a lot of questions. They also have great peer-to-peer support there as well.
I can also share just personally because we, recently experienced that horrible Lapu Lapu tragedy in Vancouver. It affected my family personally, and Rob and Tegan were both there to help. And so that was a very personal note, but I can kind of attest to the power of their work, and I deeply appreciated that. So listen, I think we're at time. Thank you so much. I can't thank you enough, really, for sharing your wisdom, your thoughts with all of us. Tegan and Rob, it's always a pleasure. Let me just try to take away a quick summary here. I mean, we have a crisis in this country. It's easy to despair, but we know that so many people care about this crisis and are trying to help, and you're offering some hope. You're offering the chance for people to join a community that is going to make a better system for our kids, the system that they deserve, so that they don't just have a moment, but they find that one moment that will break them through to a better life, right? And I think the that's the what's on offer today. It's incredibly inspiring. So again, everybody, please go to operationovercome.com. Go check out Kelty Foundation, check out the Robb Nash Project, watch Robb Nash's documentary on YouTube, and while you're at it, go listen to Robb Nash on Spotify.